Good morning on this wet, cold Australian winter morning. It's been dreadful for the last few days, and do you know what? I've never known rain like it, even coming from the UK. And it's funny because the other half was saying to me that it was wetter last year here, but I knew different. And on the news yesterday, it's confirmed that this has been the wettest winter in many, many years. So I knew that wasn't the case. And it's been bloody awful. And every ache, pain, you name it, I've got at the moment. And I'd just be glad to see the back of it. It's just awful, doing my head in. Really doing my head in. So roll on the summer, which hopefully won't be too far away, although we are going away soon. So, I don't care as long as I'm away from Australia at this time of year. Anyway, childhood. Now, last week I was talking about smoking, and I started back in my childhood, blaming my grandmother for my addiction, which lasted 30 plus years. In truth, it was my fault. It wasn't my grandmother's fault. I didn't mean to say that. I think people are well aware that if you're a smoker and you choose to do it, that's your problem, nobody else's. So, childhood. So, I was born in 1971, the best year to be born, obviously, and I was born in Portsmouth. Now, Portsmouth was never a place I lived until later in life, and I only lived there for 4 years. I did, however, live in Southampton for many years, so I've talked about the rivalry between the two cities before, so I'm not going to go into detail there. I suppose I had a pretty normal, average childhood, really. I grew up in social housing. So we had a flat in Fareham, or not actually. Well, my family itself came from the village of Titchfield, and I grew up in a flat which was just outside of Titchfield, and it was pretty idyllic. I loved it. It was a great flat. It was a big flat. I mean, bear in mind I was a child, so my concept of what it was will probably be very different to my father's concept if you asked him today. Although having chats with Dad, it's clear that I think his fondest memories, like mine, are from that flat in Nash Way, Fareham. The school I went to was opposite where I lived, so it was literally within spitting distance. And on the actual complex, so there was like two parts to the flats. There was which was sort of separated by like a glass walkway, and the people I went to school with lived there. So we were all around about the same sort of age, and it was a great place to grow up, literally. Doors were always open, and we just went in each other's neighbours' houses, and it was great. I remember Penny, I remember Lee, who used to live next door to me. There was Mia, who lived upstairs. Do you know what? It was like its own little community. It was relatively new as well, so these flats hadn't been built that long, so it felt modern. It was the early 70s. I think my earliest memory I can go back to was probably, around about 75, 76, that hot summer actually of 1976. And we spent that in the flat. Wonderful, playing out the fields. I mean, look, you could go into the school and there were just playing fields as far as the eye could see. It was, what I thought. And it was just a great time to be young, really. We had no access to computers, mobile phones, and everything was centered around outdoors, playing with friends. And do you know what? If I could go back to that time, I really would. Today, like this morning, I woke up, aches, pains, old age, real old age. And some days I feel really, really old, and other days I feel great. But today I feel, ugh, I feel meh. And I look it too. So I hurt in places that no human being should hurt in, to be honest with you. And as a child, gosh, did I have aches and pains? No, I didn't. I mean, look, I think the things that I remember are how can I put it? Getting stuck at the top of Mrs. Roberts' fence. Now, Mrs. Roberts was an old lady who lived in a bungalow, and it was very close to where we lived. And I remember trying to climb over the fence, and I got stuck. And this dear old lady helped me over the fence. It was her fence. And yeah, so I ripped my trousers, and yeah, it was awful. And I grazed all my leg, and I can actually remember the pain, the bleeding pain. And the other time, there was two other times where I remember pain as a child. It's a bizarre conversation, but hey. One was when my uncle, who was the same age as me, and we went to school together. And for the first year, we were in the same class, incidentally. But anyway, he hit me over the head with a hammer, and I was bleeding. I think it was that side, because I've still got a scar there now, and there was blood everywhere. And I remember, I remember that pain distinctly, and I remember running into Mum, and Mum was saying, "Oh, get over it. It's fine. Don't worry about it." And she put a couple of butterfly stitches on. These days, you'd be rushed to emergency. You'd have proper stitches, and you'd probably have counselling and everything, you know. But back then, God, get over it. It was just a hammer. It's your head, whatever. And the other time was when I used to carry this China Wade Whimsy. I've written about this actually. What was it? Giraffe in my pocket, and I used to carry it around with me everywhere. And I remember my nanny Vi. She was taking me out for the day, and we walked from the flat in Ash Way across the road, and I fell over, and I fell right onto this China giraffe, and oh, the pain. Once again, I've still got the scars, and yeah, it was really painful. Actually, there was one other time, and kids these days wouldn't remember or wouldn't have access to glass marbles. Big thing back in the early 70s. I had a rusty old tin full of them. We used to take them to school. We used to play marbles and stuff, which is fine. And somebody tried to steal my marbles, and I remember grabbing this tin back off them, and I cut my finger all the way along this tin. Scars there again. And the blood, I've never seen so much blood, and I fainted. I remember as a child, I literally fainted. And I've never liked blood ever since then, to be honest with you. So, there you go. So anyway, school days were, yeah, it was pretty normal, really. It was good. I loved being young. I had close contact with my maternal and paternal grandparents, and my nanny Poppy, that was my gran on my mother's side. She adopted two children, my aunt and my uncle, and we were all around about the same sort of age. So we all grew up together, and which was absolutely wonderful, and that really made my childhood. Fond memories of Christmas spent with my extended family. I can't fault it. I really can't. Of course, and I've talked about it before, but always in the back of my mind there was the gay thing. So I suppose from the age of 11, I knew I was gay. I'm not going to talk about this particularly because I've talked about it before. So despite I could have had a much more fulfilling relationship with my grandparents had um, had I come to terms with my sexuality. But then at 11 years old, although you know you're different, you don't know the reasons why, and that is the biggest problem. So they were difficult years in many respects. Although I loved my childhood absolutely 100%. As I grew older and I knew I was different, especially sort of 12, 13 years old, they were really difficult years. You know, I was quite a loner as a child, and that was quite that was quite hard. But I think that sort of came into play when I was um, discovering my sexuality, I suppose. So I suppose definitely teenage years, I found it very difficult to mix with people, and that was. Look, I'm quite an outgoing person, but for someone to sit here and waffle on to you for 15 minutes, with rubbish all to say really, because it's just me and my life, which I enjoy talking about. But for someone to do that, you've got to be quite outgoing. But back in the day, I was reserved, quiet, locked myself away quite a lot, and would listen to my cassette tapes or records, and I would try and escape, and I'd have dreams of a different life, where I was normal and not abnormal, and it was scary at times because I did get to some very low points, and when you're that young and you get that low, it becomes a problem. And I think it did become a problem, certainly at school. I could have done a lot better if I had more focus on or direction on where I wanted to go rather than concentrating on, you know, being gay. And that was the major issue for me, which is why, I didn't do as well in life as I would have liked, in all honesty. Compare me to my brother, and my brother's what, one, two, God, 4, 5 years older than, sorry, younger than me, and he was a typical lad, really. So he played football, cricket, he did all those things, lads did. He had a really big circle of friends, and he's done exceedingly well for himself. And he's now, I think, the last time my father said he's a deputy head or was a deputy head, I can't remember, but he's done well. And we don't get on. We haven't got on for God, since we were kids, literally. And I haven't spoke to my brother in probably since, well, definitely since Mum's funeral, and so that's what, 5 years ago, which is difficult because I do love my brother, but we're just so different. We are really different people, and I suppose in many respects I'm quite jealous of the fact that he has done so well, and he's basically doing a job that I would have loved to have done myself as a teacher. And having said that, I did teach kids in Spain for a very brief period of time, but I would have loved to have forged a good career, and that just wasn't meant to be. And I know we have to blame ourselves for our lack of focus and direction and all the rest of it. We have to an extent, but I think my sexuality was the biggest problem going forward. And I was always trying to hide something, so I was trying to hide who I am and pretending that I had a girlfriend as I got older, etc., when actually in reality I was, I had boyfriends. So at the age of 16, I had boyfriends and lads that I used to see, and yeah, I used to pretend they were girls. And that's more about the times I was growing up in, because it was not acceptable to be gay. It really wasn't. I did go to school with some other gay friends who I'm still friends with, as I've mentioned before, and had really good friendships with them. They could have been even closer friendships if I'd probably been more relaxed with who I was, and that just wasn't. wasn't meant to be. There's a lot. I think you can detect, but there's a lot of regrets with my childhood. I wish I'd been more out there as kids are today. I mean, when you look at kids these days, they can be who they want to be, and really, there's no judgment. Although, having said that, we tend to be going backwards a little bit in the world, and for me, my life was just centered around ducking and diving, pretending to be someone I wasn't. These days, you can wear that banner on your sleeve. You know, you can wear your red ribbon, you can wear your pride flag, you can do all those things, which is great. And having someone to talk to was probably the hardest, or not having someone to talk to was probably the hardest part about it all, because when you're young, you definitely need someone there to talk to, and I just didn't have that at all. I probably could have spoke to my parents, but you know, because they were or are, or my dad certainly is very liberal, and he would have been extremely accepting. But growing, it's a generational thing. It's, you know, I grew up at a different era, in all honesty. So yeah, I mean, childhood, small market town, social housing flat. We used to walk from the flat, remember, through the back of the school down to the tiny village that I was a big part of, and you know, we used to pick blackberries on the way, and it was lovely. There was a pub at the bottom opposite Titchfield Abbey where we would sit and, you know, have a drink, and we would often go down to the village where my great gran still lived, and my great aunt as well, and we would be there for carnival days, the bonfire boys, and you know, we would be stood outside great gran's house, and it was lovely. And I, that aspect of it I cannot fault. But obviously, you know, there are many aspects which I wish I could change and go back and do. Somebody said to me the other day, would you go back? Would you do it all again? And yes, I would. And I say this frequently. I would go back and I would do everything again, because childhood, nobody prepares you for childhood. Nobody prepares you for teenagehood. You just let you get on with it. I think today it's possibly a little bit different. But going back, knowing what I know now, I would have done things a lot different, for sure. I would not have picked up that first cigarettes, and I would have been more open with my mother and father about who I was, and you know, I would have been a lot more outgoing than I tended to be at that time as well. So yes, lots of regrets, but you know, life's life, and we have to make the most of it. So today, this has been good for me. It's been very cathartic because it's been good getting things off my chest, and this is why I do this. And I do get a lot of reaction from people on YouTube when I post these, but it's literally simply a way of offloading any issues that I have or anything that's on my mind. And if you want to look at the blog, roamingbrit.com, do so. There's a section on there called Short Stories from My Youth, which you can read, and it's a lot about my childhood. That's how much it meant to me. I write about it frequently, and I have a little pad by the side of my bed, and I write down things that I want to talk about or write about on the blog. I've got a whole list to go through because I haven't written any short stories for a while, but it will happen. So anyway, look, got to go. I'm up to nearly 20 minutes and I've been waffling for that amount of time yet again. So look, have a good day and take care. Ciao. I've got this little, nothing works. I've got this little remote control, and I'm going to try turn it off, but it's not working. So I'm going to use my hand. Ciao for now.